You're sitting at the dinner table with your college friends, the ones you haven't seen in 2 years because everyone's busy now, and somehow the conversation drifts the way it always does after the second bottle of wine toward money. Not in a serious way, just someone casually mentioning they refinanced, someone else saying they maxed out their Roth this year, and then one guy, the one who became an engineer and married someone in pharma, says, almost as an aside, that they're pretty close to the number. And you smile and nod because you know exactly what the number means, and you are not pretty close to it. You're not sure you're on the same map as it. You drive home doing math in your head. You make decent money. You have a 401k. You're not irresponsible. So why does it feel like you're running and the finish line keeps moving? Here's what nobody tells you at that dinner table. The gap between the people quietly on track and the people earning good money but somehow building almost nothing is not an income gap. It's a specific set of decisions, most made in a 10-year window, that compound silently in one direction or the other for decades. Spoiler alert. The math explains everything, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. My name is Nick, and I spend an embarrassing amount of time staring at Federal Reserve data so you don't have to. Today we're breaking down the real average and median net worth by age in 2026, what it should be, and most importantly, there's the specific mechanisms that separate households building wealth from the ones wondering where it all went. Let's get into it. Before the breakdown by age, I need to clear something up, because the financial media has been misleading you about this for years. If you've ever searched average American net worth, you've seen a number around $1,063,700. That is the official Federal Reserve figure. It is also, for the purposes of your actual life, almost completely meaningless. That number is the mean, the mathematical average, and it gets absolutely demolished by people at the extreme top. The top 1% of households controls 31% of all wealth. The top 10% controls 67%. The bottom half of the entire country, 165 million people, controls just 2.5%. So when Elon Musk's $839 billion net worth gets averaged in with yours, the resulting number describes nobody. If you and Elon were the only two people in an elevator, the average net worth on that elevator would be approximately $420 billion. You have not become richer. You have become a rounding error. The number you actually want is the median, is at the midpoint where half the country is above and half is below. The Federal Reserve's median household net worth is $192,700. That's the real number. That's the one that describes a family somewhere in the middle of America. The gap between the mean and the median, $1,063,700 versus $192,700, is 5.5 times. That single gap tells you almost everything about wealth concentration in this country. Now let's look at what those numbers look like by age. Depending on how old you are, what follows is either interesting or deeply uncomfortable, maybe both. All of this comes from the Federal Reserve's 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances, the gold standard for household wealth data. The next one lands late 2026. This is the most current data that exists. Let me introduce someone to make this concrete. We'll call him Derek. Derek is 34, lives in Columbus, works in IT, makes $68,000 a year, has a 401k he set up during new hire orientation and hasn't thought about since, and $4,300 in a savings account he keeps meaning to move somewhere smarter, a plan he has had for approximately 3 years. Derek is not a cautionary tale. Derek is the median American under 35. Under 35, median net worth, $39,000. $39,000. Yes, that's everything. Home equity, retirement accounts, the car minus what they owe. All of it netted out. $39,000 is what's left after a decade of working. That's one decent used car. That's less than one semester of grad school at a private university. That is, in certain zip codes, a used Toyota Camry with high mileage and an aux cord that only works if you hold it at a specific angle. Derek turns 38. He got a few raises, got married. They're making $115,000 combined now. They bought a house, a real one with a backyard, and feel like they finally crossed into legitimate adulthood. Ages 35 to 44, median net worth $135,600. Sounds okay until you run it against the benchmark. Fidelity says you should have 3 times your salary saved by 40. On $115,000 combined, that's $345,000 in retirement savings alone. And the median household in this bracket has $135,600 across their entire financial life. Retirement, home equity, everything. Less than halfway to a target that only counts one thing. This is also the decade where the gap between Derek and his engineer friend from that dinner table starts becoming mathematically difficult to close. Every year you're behind in your 30s requires roughly 2 years of extra effort in your 40s to compensate. The gap doesn't wait for you to get ready. Derek is now 47, the kids are in middle school, the house needs a new roof, he got a promotion last year and celebrated by leasing a new SUV. He'd been driving the same car for 9 years and felt like he'd earned it. Which, to be fair, he had. He just also quietly agreed to pay $748 a month for 60 months for the privilege of feeling that way. Ages 45 to 54. Median net worth, $247,200. These are peak earning years. Compounding should be doing serious heavy lifting right now. For some people it is. For Derek, it isn't because the promotion money quietly disappeared into a larger life. The lease, the roof, 2 kids who discovered that extracurriculars are expensive, a lifestyle that expanded the moment income rose to fill it. Fidelity wants 6 times his salary, roughly $490,000, in retirement savings alone. He has $247,200 across everything. He is behind in a way that now requires real intentionality to fix. Ages 55 to 64. Median net worth, $320,700. This is when people stop abstractly knowing they should save more and start actually doing the retirement math. And discovering the number they have and the number they need are very different numbers. Fidelity says 8 times your salary by 60. On $75,000, that's $600,000. The median person in this bracket has $364,500 total. That is not $600,000. That is the number you get when you were supposed to be at $600,000, but life kept happening and somehow you let it. Ages 65 to 74, median net worth $409,900. The peak. Net worth tops out here, then declines as people actually spend what they spent 40 years building. Ages 75 and up. Median net worth $335,600. Medical costs taking real bites. The question at this age is whether the portfolio outlasts the person. A fixable problem at 40 and a much harder one at 76. Here's what I want you to understand before we talk about solutions. If you're behind on these numbers, you are not failing a fair test. You're losing a rigged game designed to look like a fair one. Let me show you exactly how the machine works. Your income goes up, say you get a $12,000 raise. Before you do anything intentional with it, lifestyle inflation quietly consumes the first half. You upgrade the apartment or start getting DoorDash twice a week, or the car lease comes up and you tell yourself you deserve something slightly nicer. None of these decisions feel reckless. Each one feels completely reasonable. And together, they absorb roughly $6,000 and leave you feeling correctly like you barely noticed the raise. The other $6,000, a third goes to higher marginal taxes. The rest dissolves into the expanded spending that comes with a bigger life. More subscriptions, slightly better vacations, a gym membership you use irregularly but feel too guilty to cancel because canceling it would mean admitting you're not the person who goes to the gym and you're not ready to have that conversation with yourself. This is lifestyle inflation. It's the silent net worth killer nobody talks about because it doesn't feel like failure. It feels like progress. It looks like success to everyone around you. And it quietly ensures that your wealth gap at 45 looks almost identical to your gap at 35, despite earning $400,000 more over that decade. Then there's the car situation. The average new car payment in 2026 is $748 a month. That's $8,976 a year going to a depreciating asset that will be worth 40% of its purchase price in 5 years. Total outstanding auto loan debt in America just crossed $1.67 trillion. There are real households, people with mortgages and 401ks and very strong opinions about school districts, paying more in car payments every month than they put toward retirement. They are financing a vehicle that loses value every single day to avoid funding an account that gains value every single year. That trade is happening voluntarily across millions of American driveways right now. Student loans are the other side of this. $1.84 trillion in total debt, average balance $39,500, average interest rate 6.53%, and the average payment is around $440 a month on something that does not build your net worth. It just keeps the balance from growing. While that money could be compounding forward, it's compounding backward first. None of this is your fault, but you cannot fix a machine you don't understand. Let me slow down for a second, because data doesn't capture what this experience feels like day to day. It feels like checking your bank account before deciding whether to order what you actually want on the menu. It feels like that specific Sunday night anxiety, not about work, but about the week's spending, running a mental tally of what came in and what went out. Feels like your HVAC going out in August, $4,800 to replace, and choosing between draining the emergency fund you spent 2 years building or putting it on a credit card at 22% interest. You choose the credit card because the emergency fund feels more dangerous to lose than the interest feels painful to pay. And then you spend 3 months paying that off instead of investing. It feels like getting a raise and being happy about it for about a week before realizing your lifestyle has already expanded to consume it and you're not actually further ahead. It feels like that dinner table conversation, someone casually mentioning they're pretty close to the number and driving home doing math, wondering how. Here's the statistic I think matters most in this entire topic. Not the median, not the benchmarks. This one. The median net worth of a homeowner in America is approximately $400,000. The median net worth of a renter is $10,400. That is a 38 times difference. And when researchers strip home equity out entirely and look only at other assets, homeowners still hold 15 times more wealth than renters. The act of owning a home changes every other financial behavior around it. It creates forced savings. It anchors people long enough for investments to compound. It changes the relationship with money fundamentally. It's not the house. It's what the house does. Now, this is not an argument to go buy a house you cannot afford. Buying a home that consumes 50% of your take-home is not wealth building. It's financial imprisonment with a nice backyard. But it does explain a significant chunk of why the net worth numbers look the way they do across decades. The other divider, 401k auto enrollment. Plans that automatically enroll employees have average balances of $158,000. Plans that require employees to actively opt in have average balances of $107,000. That $51,000 difference is explained almost entirely by one thing: whether you had to do something to start saving or do something to stop. One default setting, $51,000. That is the cost of one decision you never quite got around to making. Here's something the data actually shows that goes against the story you've probably heard. Millennials are not worse off than boomers were at the same ages. Using inflation-adjusted Federal Reserve data, the median millennial at 40 has more net worth than the median boomer did at 40. But, and this is the part that matters, millennial wealth is far more unequal than boomer wealth was. The top 10% of millennials are dramatically richer than the top 10% of boomers were at the same age. The bottom 30% are significantly worse off. So the headline, "Millennials are catching up," is technically true at the median and completely misleading if you're not near the top. Gen X got genuinely hammered. They were in prime wealth accumulation years, 35 to 44, during the 2008 financial crisis. They watched home values crater and retirement accounts evaporate. Gen X in their 50s today holds about 43% less wealth than boomers did at the same age. They did everything right and got hit by one of the worst economic collapses in a century at the worst possible moment. If you're Gen X and feel behind, there is a legitimate historical reason that has nothing to do with your choices. The broad picture. Boomers control roughly 51% of all US wealth, while being 20% of the population. Millennials, the largest working age generation, control about 10%. The great wealth transfer, an estimated $124 trillion moving between generations over the next 2 decades, will shift some of this. But it'll be wildly unequal. If your parents have wealth to pass on, your trajectory looks different. If they don't, you're building from scratch, and that's not a personal failure. It's just the starting line you were given. Here's where Derek's story and yours either continues on its current trajectory or changes direction. In your 20s, the only thing that matters is starting. If you invest $7,500 a year at 25, earning 8% annual returns, you'll have roughly $1.94 million by 65. Start at 35 with the identical plan, and you end up with $875,000. A 10-year delay costs you over $1 million. Not from bad investments, just from being late. At the absolute minimum, contribute enough to your 401k to get the full employer match. That's an instant 50 to 100% return on every dollar. Nothing on earth beats it in your 30s. This is the decade that rewrites everything after it. Max the 401k at $24,500 and the IRA at $7,500. That's $32,000 a year compounding forward. This is also when the housing decision becomes load-bearing for your net worth trajectory. Make it honestly, not emotionally. Not based on what the broker approves or what your friends paid, based on what fits inside your financial life without turning your budget into a hostage negotiation. In your 40s, peak earning years, this is not the time to finally start living a little. This is the time to pour money into the engine that determines what the next 25 years look like. And if you have kids approaching college age, I know this sounds cold, but hear me, there are loans for education. There are no loans for retirement. Your kid can recover from starting at a state school. You cannot recover from being 68 with $180,000 in a 401k because you funded tuition instead. Not in your 50s, the government, in a rare moment of self-awareness, always acknowledged that a lot of people are behind and built catch-up contributions into the tax code. In 2026, over 50s can add an extra $8,000 to their 401k beyond the standard limit. But here's the one almost nobody knows about. And I want you to actually pay attention here because Congress accidentally did something useful. Between ages 60 and 63 specifically, Secure Act 2.0 created a super catch-up, like $11,250 instead of $8,000. That extra $3,250 per year over 4 years means $13,000 in additional tax-sheltered savings, and most people in that window have never heard it exists. Also, check your Social Security estimate at ssa.gov. Delaying your claim from 62 to 70 increases your monthly benefit by roughly 76%, which over a full retirement is often worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let me bring Derek back one last time. Derek is 52. He had a real conversation with his wife last month about retirement, not the vague, we should think about that version they'd been having for 8 years, but an actual one with the account open on the laptop. His 401k balance, $143,000. His salary, $82,000. Fidelity's benchmark, $492,000. He is $349,000 short of a number that only counts retirement. He sat with that for a while. Then he did something most people don't. He ran the math on what changing his behavior looks like from here. If he maxes his 401k for the next 15 years, including catch-up contributions, his employer adds 4%, and the market returns historical averages, he retires at 67 with approximately $1.1 million. It's not the yacht, but a retirement that works. The gap between the person at that dinner table quietly nodding and the person who actually ends up okay almost never comes down to income. It comes down to whether you ran the numbers honestly, understood the machine working against you, and made a specific set of boring, consistent adjustments that compounded quietly in your direction for decades. Ramsey Solutions surveyed 10,000 everyday millionaires. 79% received zero inheritance. 1/3 never earned six figures in a single year. 8 in 10 built their entire net worth through consistent 401k contributions over time. They didn't beat the system, they just didn't let it beat them. Your net worth at 65 is being written right now in the decision about this year's raise and whether you finally set up that Roth, in whether you run the real numbers instead of the comfortable ones. None of it feels important in the moment. All of it is. By watching this, you just did something most people never do. You look the real numbers in the eye. Don't let that be the end of the story.